Happy Sabbath. Before we get into it, would you please bow your heads just for a word of prayer? Father in heaven, Lord, I just want to thank you for life. Thank you that you're not only the giver but also the sustainer of life. Lord, I just pray and ask now that I am not seen, Lord, and that you are seen, and that the working that you've done in my life is visible, and that you open our hearts and minds, and that we're able to receive your word, Lord. I thank you for your love. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay. So I'll be sharing a bit about my life and how I came to know God. And I guess the best place to start is at the beginning, right? So I was born into a loving family. Both parents Romanian. They came over here when there was communism. They fled communism like many people in this church did, seeking a new life, a life of opportunity and new beginnings and freedom, especially religious freedom. And my home environment was very loving, beautiful Christian family, good values, good principles, 2 brothers and a sister, and I couldn't have asked for more. My parents gave me everything that I wanted to have: a good education, traveling, and experiences. We traveled all over the world, all through Europe, all through, even went to America and all over Australia, even lived in Romania. And I can't thank them enough for the sacrifice that they gave for us. And they put me through a good education. I went to a Christian primary school, Adventist primary school, Nunawading Christian College as it is called now. And it was a beautiful environment. And then high school came on and I changed schools to a all-boys Anglican school, Southwood was its name, and I went from this environment, from a God-centered focus with not many people, to a school where it's only boys, and you're very weird because you don't eat certain foods and you can't do things on Saturday or Friday nights, and straight away you've gone from being popular to straight away on the outside, and that was very hard to deal with. But it came, and I had to stand for my faith, and that's the first time I really had to do that at such a young age, having to question why I believed what I believed, because then I had to go and give answers to the kids in my school. And it was beautiful. Beautiful relationships that it created. Even with the teachers, they had a respect for me that they didn't really have for other kids because no one else had this sort of faith. And when I got to about, I think it was 15 years old, 14, 15, we moved overseas to Romania, and we lived there for about a year, 2 years, and that was a beautiful experience as well. But like my mum says, she couldn't wait to come back home. And we came back, and I had matured a little bit. I came back, and all of a sudden, the things I hadn't noticed before, I started noticing. One thing in particular was girls. And all of a sudden, not only was I noticing them, but they were also noticing me in return. And that is very nice, very nice as a young boy. All of a sudden you have attention. Who's this new boy who came back from overseas, and everyone's talking about you. And it's good, but it can also be very bad. And this is when I got into a relationship with my first girlfriend. And we were very young. And it was a relationship of almost like a brotherly relationship. When you're that young and you grow up with someone, you go through a lot together, but you're not mature. You don't know the world. You don't know what's to come. You're only in school, and life changes constantly. And as my life was changing so rapidly at that age, I also too wanted to be popular and wanted to be friends with everyone and just be liked, like every young kid wants to be in school. He wants to be liked and wants to have the approval of his peers. And this is what I really started to search for, to work towards having my approval of my peers. And we were still going to church and on the weekends, and I was a good Christian boy on the weekends, and when Sabbath came around, it was a beautiful time I could spend with my family and my friends, but I didn't quite understand the reasons why I was going to church, the reasons necessarily why I believed in God. And I could feel God pulling at my heart all these times throughout my younger ages. And in the back of my mind, I was always saying, not yet, God. There's still so much to do. There's still so much fun to be had. And this is when I got involved into a world of skateboarding. And I started skating at the young age of 16, 17, and I'd spend many summers down at the skate park, and I grew a very good relationship and a great community with the people there. But not everyone is good in the world, and there are bad people who come in and out, and at a skate park it's a free-for-all. There's people there from all walks of life. And as the skateboarding culture goes, it also revolves around a lot of graffiti and other sort of victimless crimes, I guess you could call it. And this is when I started getting involved with a lot more of those sort of things, a lot of graffiti, stealing, and it started off very small, and it grew. You compromise a little bit and you justify in your mind. You're like, okay, it's not that bad, you know. God still loves me, right? And I can continue to do these things, and I'm not actually stealing from anyone, I'm just stealing from a shop, right? And it got to the point where I was going into shops and coming out with thousands of dollars of clothes, and going back the next day wearing the same clothes I stole to steal them again. And this is how crazy it was. Got to the point where I could do whatever I wanted. Whatever I wanted to do, I could have. I wasn't working. I was still going through school, and I didn't want to ask my parents for things because I knew they were struggling, and this is the way I sort of justified it in my mind, and that it was okay. It was okay to do this. I wasn't hurting anyone. And this whole time, God was still pulling me constantly, but I was just pushing him away. And as it goes, school finished. I ended up getting into the course that I wanted to get into, which was photography, pursuing a career in photography. I got into fine art at Victorian College of the Arts at Melbourne Uni. And when I finished high school, I went overseas with my girlfriend, and again I thank you for, I thank my mum and my dad for supporting this, because this is a gift that they gave me, that when I finished high school and got into the degree that I was wanting to achieve, that they would buy me a plane ticket overseas. So I went overseas with my girlfriend at the time, went to Romania and the rest of Europe, and spent a lot of time with family, and it was very beautiful. But little did I know that while I was overseas and when I would come back, that my entire life would be changing. And I found out that my parents were getting a divorce, and this, completely shattered my life. At the age of 18, 19, you're transitioning into an adult, into adulthood, learning how the world works, and still needing guidance for that. And when I came back, my life was completely different. My family was broken, and all of a sudden I still needed a dad, but now I'm being told that I need to be the dad for my brothers and sister. And it was not fair. I was so angry with God. This unit that was told that is always going to be there forever, not only by your family but by the church. That this family unit is what God has given us, and all of a sudden it's taken away. And this was very painful, very hard to deal with. And my life was completely changed. But I thank my mum for being a God-fearing lady, and through the pain and suffering that we went through, she took us on a mission trip, and we went to India. Maranatha mission trip to India, and it was a beautiful experience. At first it was a bit weird. I hadn't necessarily been in an environment where you're constantly at the service of others. From when you wake up to when you go to sleep, waking up, spending time with God, spending time with other people, worshiping together, then going out and serving others, and then coming back, sharing testimonies throughout the day, and then ending your day with God. And in this short period of 2-3 weeks, that daily communion with God and that serving of others and that selfless lifestyle gave me a taste of who God really was. I started to create a relationship with God, not only in the sense of me knowing that there is a God and that He created everything, but He started to really speak to me on a personal level. And it says in Psalms 34:8, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in Him." And I truly tasted the Lord, and nothing else fulfilled me like that. And then we came back again, and we had to pick up the pieces, right? Life was just how we left off, and I came back to my girlfriend, and when I met up with her, she said to me, like, "Wow, you're so different." You know, she could visibly see a change in my life, even after that short period. And I was on fire for God, and she could see that, and it scared her a lot, because she was not someone who had a faith or a strong faith. And I started to be very frank with her. I started to really think about my future and where it was going, and if I was truly involving God in all my decisions. And that ended up, and the result of that ended us. We ended up breaking up because I wanted a life with God, and she did not. And that was very hard at that age, 19 going on to 20. Not only losing my girlfriend at the time, but also losing my dad, losing my family, as I knew it. And although I had tasted God and I knew what it entailed to have a relationship with God, once I started going through that pain and suffering of that relationship and the heartache of the family, I didn't go to God with my pain and suffering. I went to my friends, and I sought for comfort in the only place I knew at the time. And my friends took me into a world of partying and drugs, and that's what I used to cope with the pain and suffering. And it wasn't all of a sudden, but it was bit by bit, slowly. And all of a sudden I didn't realize anymore the person that I was. And this continued on. The contrast from being so focused on God and then all of a sudden just striving for the world, I guess. I started to seek for the approval of my friends again, And even though I didn't approve of what they were doing, because I wanted to be a part of that family, I started to compromise on what I thought was right and wrong. And I started going out to these parties, these clubs, and it took me into a very dark place. And by this time, I finished my degree. I was searching for a job, but I couldn't find a job in my field. Then I started another degree, did a personal training course, went straight into work, was very busy, very successful in my personal training career, was 40 clients a week. And even that wasn't enough. I was just hungry for something, but I didn't know what it was. I was trying to fill my life with everything that I could find, and it just wasn't satisfying me. At one point, I was working 3 jobs at once. I would wake up in the morning, be at the gym at 5, work till 9, go work on roofs during the day, labour work, then come home, and then go do photography work till midnight. Day in, day out, just sacrificing my life for gain and all these things that I was searching after, for money, for success, and for the things that we're told that we need to attain. And by this time, I had gone on in my life and really had gone so far away from God that I didn't even realize how far I was. I was living out of home, and I had gotten a new girlfriend at this point, and it got to the point where I was spending all my money on just partying, $300, $400, $500 a night, easy, on nothing, 2-3 times a week. And it was just emptiness, and the harder I tried to stay away from it, the more I fell into it. And God gave me a moment of clarity. After a long weekend of partying, I was sitting in these gardens in the city, and I was just looking at this creation and wondering how beautiful and intricate it all is, how complex and how incredible it is that I am right where I am here today, and that it couldn't have been any other way except it was a miracle of God. And I started to realize that God is real, and God spoke to me so powerfully, not audibly, but he spoke straight to my heart. And he just asked me a question, and he said, who are you choosing? And I was like, what? What do you mean, God? Who am I choosing? And then I started to think, and it was resonating in my mind and in my heart, and I'm like, wow, I don't think I'm choosing God. And then by default, it must mean I'm choosing Satan. And then this started to really ring true in my heart, and I'm like, oh no, what have I done? I'm choosing Satan. And then it really scared me, really scared me. And especially in the state I was in, it shook me to my core. God started to give me a conscience again, and I started to realize, and I started to able to differentiate between right and wrong, and I started to realize that the way I was living my life, the things that I was doing, they weren't right. I was like, oh no, now I've got to do something about this. And I started to pray. I hadn't prayed in years, and I just was so lost, but I knew God was calling me. And I just started to ask God and search for who God really was and what he wanted from me. And life went on, and this was a very short period of time, and I remember that we went away for New Year's, my girlfriend and I and a few friends, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, just alone, waiting for the rest of our friends to show up, and she just asked me, do you have a New Year's resolution? Like, what's your New Year's resolution? And I thought a little bit, and I said, I think I want to get closer to God. And she just sort of laughed at me and made fun of me. And I was like, wow, like this person that I thought I loved is making fun of me for wanting to be closer to my Creator. And straight away I just resented her. It was like there was a wall just put between us. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break it. And this just created a divide in our relationship. And we ended up breaking up as well. And then all these things were changing in my life, and I was trying to stop partying and stop wasting all my money. And you don't realize the hold certain things and certain substances and habits have over you until you try to stop doing them. And then you realize how helpless you truly are. And this is when I started to seek for God, for who He really was. And this is when I remembered about the time I was in India, the time I was spending time in communion with God, and I said, okay, I've heard of waking up in the morning and just reading the Bible. I heard of prayer in the morning, and I'm just going to give this a go. If God doesn't change my life, then it doesn't matter. I'll just keep doing whatever I was doing, and it'll all work out in the end. And at that time, I didn't even know where my Bible was. I downloaded the Bible on my phone, and it opened to the book of John. And I said, great. The story of Christ. There's no better place to start than the story of Christ. And I purposed in my heart, and I said to God, every day I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read a chapter of this book. Easy. A chapter of this book. And if God doesn't change my life, if God doesn't give me victory and help me with my addictions and help me with the pain and suffering that I'm going through, then God isn't real, and I'll just keep doing whatever I'm doing. And I would sit down every morning, and I would struggle with reading the Bible. I would wrestle with it, and I would go through and read entire passages, entire chapters, and it would be like I hadn't even read it at all. It was like it was completely blank, and then I'd stop and that's weird, and then I'd pray and ask God for help and go slower and read it again, and still nothing but a little bit clearer, and then stop and go again and read a little bit more and a little bit clearer. And sometimes I'd have to read chapters 5 times over until I actually understood what it meant. And this is how deep in sin I was entrenched. I couldn't understand a single thing that pertained to the knowledge of God. But it was incredible. God started to change my life very rapidly. He started to give me victory over my sins and started to change my wants and desires. He started to change me in a way that I wasn't even prepared for. The things I wanted to do, I no longer wanted to do them. The things I enjoyed doing, I now hated. The smell of alcohol, cigarettes, anything just made me feel sick, to the point of being nauseous and having to leave certain places because I couldn't be around it anymore. If someone would light a cigarette in public, I would have to walk 100 meters away. And I started to see that God was real and that God cared about me. And I couldn't believe that this God who created me and created everything cared for me. And I'll just share a quick passage in 1 Timothy 2, 3 and 4. It says, "For this is a good and acceptable in the sight of God, our Saviour, who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth." So He desires us all to be saved, not just some, but for all of us. And I'm included in that all. And as I started to read the Bible, certain truths that I was told as a young age started to ring true. And it was a beautiful experience, truly, truly beautiful. And I was so spiritually malnourished. It was like I was so dehydrated, and it was like I couldn't get enough of God's word. I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and just spend time with God. And it just completely changed my day and made me just a better person, more fun to be around. And at that point, I had completely destroyed all the relationships with my family, all the relationships with my friends. Even though I thought it was good, it was really bad. And I'm thankful for God that He heals, not only individually, but entirely throughout relationships and through friends as well. And at this point in time, I had moved back home, and I wanted to save a bit of money. And at this point, my mum actually was wanting to sell the house and move up into the country. And I hated the idea. I couldn't think of anything worse than moving to the country and leaving my friends, leaving this place that I grew up in, and going to a place where there's nothing. No internet, no phone reception, and you're an hour from the closest shop. And that was the worst thing I could ever think of. And I said, okay. Time went on, and I was wrestling with the idea, and it wasn't getting any better. My mum was trying to tell me how good it will be, and I was just telling her how bad it will be. And a few months had passed, and she purchased this property up in northern New South Wales, and it was the Easter break, and she said, how about we all go there for Easter, spend some time together, and we'll be there for a week together, and then they'll head home, and I'll just stay there for a couple weeks and just see how I like it, if it's something I could consider and something I'm open to. And we got up there, and straight away, we all, and especially I, fell in love with this place. It's so beautiful being in God's nature, and it's something that we take advantage of. And it was very hard to get used to. The first few days was a struggle. I was nervous and shaky and expectant of something to happen. I was constantly waiting for something to happen, and I couldn't just be still. It was so hard. I was constantly checking my phone even though I had no reception. It was this battle, this war going on inside my body. And then the first week had passed, and finally I could just sit and just be still and experience the birds and the animals and the plants and the beauty, the true beauty that nature has, that God has given us. And in that 2-week period that I spent by myself, I just tore through the New Testament. Spent so much time with God and in isolation with God and developing a relationship with God. And God works in mysterious ways. Everything that I was struggling with, everything that I didn't understand, I would speak to someone, or I would watch a sermon that same day on that exact topic that I was struggling with. And this would happen day after day after day. And God was just working so powerfully in my life, and I couldn't deny it. And it was truly beautiful. And the more God was doing for me, I was just giving everything to God. And I was really scared. I was very scared to come back to Melbourne. Very scared that I couldn't, I wouldn't be able to withstand the temptation of my friends and of that lifestyle of partying and drugs. And I was scared that I wasn't strong enough. And it's true, I wasn't. But in my weakness, we are made strong through Christ. And I came back to Melbourne, and I met up with my friends, and we were going to this skate premiere, this skate movie, and it was at this cinema sort of bar place. And I was scared because I hadn't gone into a place like that for a while. And as soon as I walked into the door, I just started to smell cigarettes and alcohol, and straight away I started to feel sick. And I was like, what is going on? Like, my body is just not handling this environment. I'd have to walk out, then come back in, and then walk out, then come back in. And I was just battling with this. And it started to be more real to me that God was changing even me physically to the point that I couldn't even have anything to do with these things anymore. And I started searching for God, and I started giving more to God. As Romans says, Romans 2:11, for there is no partiality with God. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. I had achieved my goals that I wanted, and yet I was still so empty, and God was giving me the fulfillment in my life that I truly wanted. And it was beautiful, truly beautiful. I searched for God and I found him. Proverbs says that, Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returns to his own vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. You know, that is the most disgusting thing that we can see. When we see a dog walk to the corner of the room, throw up, walk away, come back, smell it, and eat it. And this is the image that has stuck with me every time I think about those temptations and the things of my past life that I still get temptations to go and do, that it is foolish, that if I go back and do those things, that it is exactly what that dog does, and it is the most disgusting thing that I can do. And Galatians says as well, Galatians 2:18, for if I build again those things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. For I through the law died to the law that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And you know, when you stop doing those things, when you stop feeding that beast inside you, it gets very hungry. It comes back harder, and Satan doesn't like that. And I started to battle with it, and Satan started to attack me in a way that I was not prepared for. And some time had passed, and I was drawing closer to God, and searching for a life with God, and realizing that if certain things in my life weren't right, then it started to make me question what other things in my life were right, and I started to question my career and the way my life was going, and if I was able to be such a strong influence for wrong, that I could now be such a strong influence for good. And I was starting to really search and push for this. And by this time I had come back to Melbourne and spent some time here, and then I had moved completely up to New South Wales, and I was spending a lot of time there just by myself, and Satan took advantage of this, really started to attack me in a way that I've only heard about through other people, and you realize how real God is when you realize how real evil is as well in this world. And I started to see things. I started to see shadows and demons and things in my vision, and I just thought that I had just broken my brain from drugs. And I thought that this is something that I'm always going to have to live with. And Satan started working on this fear that he had put in me. And it got to a point that it was really bad. I remember one day in particular that I was up in the country, and I was driving into town, and these long shadows, these long demonic figures started to appear in my vision, and it got to the point where I was driving home and they were coming up and I was almost turning the car off the road. And I had made it home and it was just this heavy fear around the house, like you're constantly being watched. And I thank God for God-fearing friends and God-fearing family. The family that we bought the property with up in New South Wales was actually arriving that same day that I was going through all these trials. And as soon as my friend Rob opened the door, he looked at me and he said to me, "Josh, are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, what's wrong?" And he's like, "No, Josh, are you all right?" And he just took me aside and said, "Are you seeing things? Are you seeing things?" And I was just like so taken back. I was like, "Wow, what do you mean? Like, how do you know?" It's like God was just impressing on my heart to ask you this. And I was like, wow, I couldn't deny that. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't want to tell anyone. I thought I was going crazy. And who would believe me? And then all of a sudden, someone comes and tells me out of the blue and asks me exactly what I'm struggling with. That was so powerful. And we went away and we prayed and sung some hymns, and from that day onwards, it's never happened again. And I'm so thankful for God for that. And as I started to search for God further and further and wanting to give back to God and what He has done for me, I started to look into missionary work and really wanted to help people, because I felt like God has changed my life so much. And if God can change my life in the place that I had come from, then God can change anyone's life. And I started going back to church, and it was very hard coming back to church and expecting everyone to be at the same place that I was, expecting everyone to be on fire for God, and this love that I had for God. I would expect everyone wanting to do that, and everyone wanted to go and tell people that God is real. And I walked into church up in Port Macquarie, and it's a very beachy area, and I walked into church, wearing a suit, and everyone's in shorts and singlet and thongs, and I was like, okay, I feel a bit weird. And people I was wanting to talk about God with everyone, and even more so the people who claim to be part of God's church, that we are here, we're worshiping God. I'm like, great, I can talk to these people about God. And it was like, I couldn't. I was even made to feel weird that I was wanting to talk to God, to people who were in the place of God. And I was like, oh no, I'm alone. There's all these young people here, and I'm just alone. No one thinks like me. No one wants to do these things. I don't know what's wrong. But I knew that it was right. I knew that God was speaking to my heart, and I just couldn't deny God. I had gone through the prophecies of Revelation and of Daniel, and that just further solidified my faith in Christ. And I couldn't deny that the Bible was real. And no matter what I saw, I just knew that I had always had to come back to this, and this was my reference point. Even though I would come into church or go here and go do this, that it might not be right, but God was always my reference point. And it started to get really lonely. I started to make friends within the church, but I found that no one was quite at the point of wanting to share God with others. And at this time, I started doing some Bible work out in the church at Warhope, and it was a beautiful experience, but I found it very limiting. It was only 1-2 days a week max, and I just wanted to do more. And by this time, I had spoken to my cousin, and there's a little ministry that runs out of Rollins Plains up in northern New South Wales called Eastwood Missions. And my cousin had been travelling around Australia with them, doing certain missionary work, doing literature evangelism work. And I had spoken to her, and she couldn't believe the change that was wrought in me. She couldn't believe and see that the person that I was and the person that I now am. And she was just, amazed. And she was saying how I need to come and do literature evangelism with her. I need to come do literature evangelism. I need to do colporteuring. I need to do canvassing. And I was like, wow, I couldn't think of anything more boring. Going door to door, selling books, that is like the most boring thing that I could ever think of. And she's like, please just try it, just come. Everyone's really nice. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I'll give it a go. And I remember taking a train up to Coffs Harbour and spending not very long, but a few days just canvassing and sharing God with people. And I realized that that's actually what I was wanting to do the whole time. And that going door to door and meeting people exactly where they were at, there was nothing better than that. And all the things that I was regretting in my life, all the pain and suffering that I went through, all the choices that I made, I was realizing that now God was using them for His glory, that the addictions that I was suffering, I could now open someone's door and there's someone who's struggling through addiction, and I can relate to them and talk to them and show them that there is peace among all this pain and suffering in this world, that there is a way out, and that there is a better life than the life that you are currently living. And it was beautiful. There was no better experience, and my faith truly started to grow. And being in situations where you completely have to rely on God, that's where our faith grows, because we no longer have strength in ourselves, because I can't control these situations. I don't know what's going to happen, especially when you're going through rough neighborhoods. We don't know what's on the other side of these doors. A lot of the times I have been threatened. A lot of the times I have been close to people threatening me, opening the door, wanting to beat me up, just for opening up and talking about God. But God has protected me throughout all my travels, and I'm so thankful and praise His name for His grace and His mercy. In Jeremiah 29:11, it says, "You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." Growing up, I saw all these people who had these perfect lives, and I just didn't understand why I didn't have that. I didn't understand why I was going to church, and that there was these people who had this fire for God, who I could see God living in them, and I didn't understand why I didn't have that same experience. That I was coming to church, I was doing the same things, yet I didn't have that same experience as they did with God. And it was because I never truly searched for God. I never truly searched for who He was with my entire heart. And I plead with you today that you search for God with everything that you have. Search for who He is, and search for His love for you. God gave me a Psalm 27 as a promise to me as I was going through all this, and I just love to share a little bit with you guys. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, my enemies and foes, they stumbled and fell. Though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise against me, in this I will be confident. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. Therefore I will offer sacrifices of joy in his tabernacle. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me, and answer me. When you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not leave me nor forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me in a smooth path, because of my enemies. Do not deliver me to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and such as breathe out violence. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. This is just a beautiful promise that God has given me, and I truly hope that it will bless you as much as it has blessed me. I thank you for the opportunity of being able to share what God has done for me, even though it was a bit, I might not have been as clear as I would have hoped. But I just pray and hope for everyone here that God's grace and mercy abounds in everyone's life, and that it is never too late. It is never too late to search for God. Yeah. Amen.
Vă mulțumim că ați urmărit această prezentare. Dacă v-a plăcut, vă invităm să subscrieți la acest canal și vă invităm să vă simțiți liberi să transmiteți mai departe acest material celor ce credeți că au nevoie de el. Fără plată ați primit, fără plată să dați.